When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Pete's Auto and Alignment. User: 56mechmark. Posted May 25, 1998.
I've been a mechanic my entire life. Started turning a wrench with my dad when I was only 8 years old, and since that day, I ain't never known how to be anything but a mechanic. But now, I honestly don't know what I am, how to act, what to do. Those little fuckers stole it all, and now I've got nothing. The shop was called Pete's Auto and Alignment. It was just past the Shell station out on County Road 46. My dad built it in '72, and I got it after he keeled over, changing a timing belt in July heat. I kept the place going as best I could. I lived in the single-wide trailer out back, drank black coffee, paid bills late, fixed engines all day. It was a simple life. I didn't need much. I never married, never cared, and never really gave much of a shit for anything. Cars made sense to me, so that's what I did. Then, 6 weeks ago, something changed. I was running a little late that morning, had a few too many whiskeys with Jamie down at the pool hall the night before. So when I sauntered in with a pounding head, I didn't think much of the smell, as bad as it was. But as the hangover lifted, the smell didn't, and I knew there was something going on. It was like sulfur and hot grease, only worse, real sharp, chemical like battery acid mixed with wet metal. I figured maybe a mouse crawled up under the heater and died. It happens more than folks like to admit, but then I saw the real source. It was just one. At first, I was sliding under a Ford Ranger when I caught movement near the jack stand. That thing was about the size of a matchbox, black and slick and fast. I thought it was a baby roach, but when I shined my light, it froze. It had too many legs, way too many, and they weren't roach legs. They were jointed like little coat hangers. There was a tail, too, curling up over its back like a scorpion's, twitching, dripping something clear that hissed when it hit the concrete. I ain't never seen anything like it before. So I smashed it with a socket wrench. Easy enough, right? A thing crunched wet like a grape wrapped in foil. I thought that'd be the end of it, just some weird freak bug. Well, 2 days later, the smell was back, but worse, way worse. This time, there were 3. They moved together, almost like they were thinking the same thought. Every time I got close, they'd scatter, but not like normal bugs. No panic. It was calculated. Well, you can bet I was pissed. I might live in a trailer, but I busted my ass to keep my workspace clean, so I dropped what I was doing and laid down traps, sprayed at least a gallon of poison, and filled every damn corner with boric acid. That'll get him, I thought, but nah. The next morning, I found that one of them and chewed through the plastic on the rat trap like it was a flimsy piece of wet cardboard. Another one was dead by the compressor, its body smoking from the acid, but as if just to spite me, there were two more crawling on it, like they were studying the way it died. I smashed the ones I could and made it a point to stop leaving food in the shop. Maybe that would help. Plus, I started sleeping with the lights on, and that seemed to work, I guess. But about a week later, I pulled a brake drum off a Dodge and found a nest. Underneath the rotor was this horrific black mass. Must have been 50 of them, tangled together, writhing, tails flicking like they were sensing the air. I backed up so fast, I tripped over the creeper. One of them darted across the floor right over my boot. It stung me on the ankle before I could shake it off. I couldn't help but scream like a baby. Son of a bitch burned like hell. My skin swelled up with this red, shiny blister that wouldn't quit leaking. Now, I ain't too proud when it comes to shit like that, so that evening I went to see Natalie, my brother's ex-wife. She was a nurse down at the hospital, been working there for years, and was pretty generous helping out. She said it was a spider bite and gave me some witch hazel, said to come by her work tomorrow and she'd get a doctor to get me some antibiotics. When I did, he took a look too. "Yup, that's a nasty one," he said. "Doesn't look like a brown recluse or nothing though, but definitely a spider." I didn't bother correcting him. That was the last time I tried to kill them with traps. I was not having none of that weak shit anymore, and I turned to fire, torching the corner with carb cleaner and a blowtorch. Black smoke, melted insulation, whole place reeked for days, but, it felt good. I was fighting back, damn it, and over the next few days, I left gas cans around the shop just in case I needed to go nuclear again. Thing is, they learned. They stopped coming out during the day, started hiding in the walls, in the ceiling, in the rafters. I'd hear them at night, clicking and scratching like they were pacing, waiting. Every now and then, one would fall, and not long after that, I started to find them in my trailer. Now, this was bad, because they were not just bugs, but still, it felt like I had it under control, at least until I popped open a customer's Malibu one morning and saw two of them nested behind the fuse box. But they weren't just inside the engine, they were integrated, like they'd wrapped themselves around the wires, feeding on the current or heat or God knows what. When I yanked one out with pliers, it made this screaming sound, real low, almost like a baby crying. Then it burst in my hand and soaked me in whatever the hell passes for blood in this thing. It was then I started to think I was losing it, that maybe my shop was cursed. Maybe I'd cracked a gas line and was just hallucinating this shit. But then the mailman saw one crawling on the shop door. He just looked at me and said, "You got a scorpion problem, Junior." But here's the thing. Scorpions don't look like that. Not around here. That night, it all came to a head. It was storming, a steady southern rain, the kind that slicks everything with grime and turns the air thick. Power flicked off and on, and I was under the hood of a Camaro when I heard it. The rafters, they were up there again, but this time they weren't just scratching. There was clicking, hundreds of tiny feet tapping in rhythm. I looked up and the whole damn ceiling was moving. Slick black bodies were crawling over the beams, tails waving like antenna, and they started dropping, a storm of bodies coming down on my head. One hit my back, another my neck, one landed on my cheek and stared at me. It didn't sting me, it just looked. I could see its face, if you could call it that. No mouth, just little black eyes that reflected my own gaze back at me, wide and terrified. And then, all at once, they moved. It was like they got some signal I couldn't hear. They poured down the walls, crawled over the toolboxes, the tires, the lifts, covered the floor like a black tide. I ran, slipping on oil and slick bodies, sprinted out the side door without grabbing a damn thing. Not my wallet, not my jacket, nothing. I doused the shop in gas. Everything I had left in the cans, I threw it through the broken window, onto the tools, the lift, the damn Camaro, and then I lit a cigarette and flipped it into the office and watched it all go up. The fire roared. Orange and black smoke billowed up into the rain. I heard something inside scream, not like a person and not like any animal I've ever known. It was deep and wrong, like the metal itself was dying. I then stood there till morning, rain coming down on my head as I watched my life, my livelihood be consumed by the flames, and when it finally came to an end, nothing moved, nothing crawled out. I think I won the war. I think, but what do I do now?
Subject, Greyhound. User, 6StringerXX. Posted, November 17th, 1997.
I got no idea what state we were in when the road disappeared. That's the honest-to-God truth. I mean, look, I was somewhere between broke and burned out, stoned and chasing a one-way ticket from Austin to Tallahassee with a guitar case, a duffel full of dirty teas, and the creeping realization that I ain't ever going back. It was one of those midnight rides I'd grown used to over the years, half the bus snoring, the other half pretending not to exist. A bus full of misfits and miscreants. just played my last gig at a dive bar off 183, and it was one of those shitholes with sticky floors, a mechanical bull, and a jukebox that skipped every time someone lit a cigarette. I sang songs nobody wanted to hear and walked out with $23 in quarters and a bruised ego. Greyhound station wasn't much better. It smelled like boiled socks and desperation. My ticket was printed on that thin paper that wrinkles if you even breathe wrong, and I remember the driver, a black baseball cap, mirrored sunglasses, even at night, and he was chewing on a toothpick like it owed him money. The name tag said Mitch. I found a seat near the back next to a guy wearing a corduroy jacket and Texas heat, and a woman with a giant pink hat like a Kentucky Derby ghost. Their skin was worn and leathery, like they spent their whole lives beaten down by the sun, a cigarette never far from their lips. Of course, everyone kept to themselves, eyes glued to windows like something was chasing them just outside the glass. But as strange as my companions might have been, that is to be expected, the real weirdness started near the state line. For some reason, I don't sleep on buses. Can't really. I guess I've just spent too many years of waking up in strangers' guest rooms and motel parking lots. So I was watching the highway mile markers blur past when I noticed the road signs started going blank. Not just faded, blank. White aluminum with nothing on them. No towns, no distances, just clean metal like they'd been scrubbed. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was fatigue, maybe smoke irritation from the bar, or even the lingering effects of that dirt weed, but no, this was real. And if that wasn't strange enough, it was the streetlights too. They got farther apart with every passing moment, and eventually they started flickering in slow, sick pulses like they were breathing. Again, I rubbed my eyes, but I was awake and I was sober. Something strange was going on. I leaned over to the old woman in the pink hat. "You seeing this?" She didn't move. Not even a twitch. Her chest wasn't even rising. I stared at her a long time before I noticed her mouth was open just a crack, lips dry as salt flats. Then she blinked. Only once, and slowly. I turned around and faced the window again. Some kind of fear settled in my gut like cold stew. Around 2:40 a.m., the bus turned off the highway. No announcement, just a sudden veer onto a two-lane road that didn't show up on the little map in the brochure. No one said anything. I waited for someone, anyone, to ask where we were going, but silence. I looked around and half the passengers had their eyes shut, but not like they were sleeping. Their heads were too straight. No slouch, no drool. It was like they were posing for a wax museum. The guy in the corduroy jacket was grinning, wide, ear to ear, in some eerie, fucked up way, like he knew the punchline to a joke I didn't want to hear. Meanwhile, the road started to get rough, gravel, dirt, then something else. I felt the tires dip. not like potholes, but like something soft was underneath. I swear to God, it felt like the wheels went from an old Texas back road to a shag carpet. And that's when we made the first stop. No buildings, no lights, just a wide field with fog curling at the edges. The driver opened the door with a hiss. A shape walked aboard, tall, too tall, arms swinging like they were jointed wrong. It wore a trench coat, but the bottom was wet, soaked like it had been walking through a river. It didn't pay, just walked halfway down the aisle and sat next to a teenage girl with a Walkman. She didn't even look up. When I blinked, the thing was gone. No sign it had ever been there. Just the girl still bopping her head to nothing, eyes blank. I jumped up and went straight to the driver. What the hell was that? But the driver didn't answer. No one did. Not a soul even acknowledged my movement. "You all see that thing?" I shouted down the aisle. My voice cracked too thin, like the air was fighting back. Eventually, a man with no eyebrows seemed to wake from his slumber. He turned toward me and croaked, "Sit down, son. This route's older than you." So, I sat. By the third stop, we weren't on any road anymore, that was for sure. Just a pale stretch of ground that pulsed faintly under the headlights. It looked like skin or muscle, something raw. And then another figure got on, this one in a funeral suit, hands stained dark. I couldn't see its face, just a blur, like TV static in the shape of a head. It slid in beside the pink hat lady. She didn't blink this time. The bus groaned. Not the engine, the bus, like it was breathing through the vents. I reached under my seat and grabbed my guitar case, not to play, just to feel something real. The latch was warm, too warm, and I swear when I reached inside and touched the strings, they twitched like nerves. I started whispering old lyrics to myself, little prayers in D minor. "I want off," I said under my breath. The man with no eyebrows turned again. "We're in the belly now, son." "What?" He nodded toward the front of the bus. "You ever gut a deer, split it down the middle? You ever step inside one and see what it saw in its last moments?" Confused, I stood up and walked toward the driver. "Mitch," I pleaded, "where the hell are we?" He didn't turn around, just adjusted his rearview mirror so I could see my own eyes. Only they weren't mine. Not exactly. The face was older. Eyes glassy, skin pale, thin scars around the corner of the mouth like someone had tried to sew it shut and failed. "You ever want to disappear, son?" Mitch said, finally breaking his silence. "Get so far off the map, no one even remembers your name?" "No, I don't." "Well, you bought the wrong ticket." I looked around again. The girl with the Walkman had wires running from her ears into her neck. The corduroy man had taken off his jacket, and underneath was nothing, just air, a hollow echo where a torso should be. A baby started crying in the front row, and when I turned to look, it was an old man shrinking. And then the lights went out. But not all at once. It just dimmed like someone was turning the volume down on reality. Outside the window, the fog turned red. I pressed my hand to the glass and felt heat, then cold, and then something like static electricity. I saw shapes moving, too big to be people, too fluid to be animals. One of them looked straight at me, no eyes, just a slit mouth that opened wide and showed me every song I'd ever forgotten to write. I screamed, but no sound came out. Yet my ears started ringing. Then I heard a whisper, "Play something." I don't know why I did it. Maybe to drown out the noise, maybe to prove I was still real. But I went and opened the case, pulled out my guitar, and felt the neck pulsing in my hands. The strings hummed, but when I strummed it just once, it was clean, pure, the only honest thing left in that bus. And everyone turned, every passenger, even the things. They stared at me like I was fire in a snowstorm. I kept playing blues licks, old gospel riffs, the kind of shit you learn in bar corners and church basements. The aisle started to ripple, the floor shook, the windows rattled, and then I sang. And the red fog screamed. The bus jolted, lights popped, sparks flew from the overhead panel. I closed my eyes and just kept playing. And finally, when I opened them again, we were back on the highway. Real signs, real pavement, and the sun starting to rise in the distance. The bus was empty. No pink hat, no corduroy, no Walkman, no Mitch, just me. 2 hours later, the bus rolled into Tallahassee.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.